Hello and welcome to Jump To It for IrishRacing.com and Betting Expert. I'm Shane Anderson. On today's show, we've got plenty to talk about, including the best ways to do form. There's been a fair bit of chatter on social media, particularly Twitter, over the past week or so, with people discussing the way that they like to do form for horse racing. So I'm going to get the insights of Stephen Harris and Ed Quigley on that. We're also going to reflect on the great meeting that we had at York last week and hopefully find our way to finding a few winners, as well as looking at some of the key meetings this weekend. As I mentioned, it's great to have Stephen Harris and Ed Quigley with me. Stephen, I'll start with you. Certainly was a brilliant week of racing last week at York, but it's only building up more and more momentum now as we get to the final part of the season. There's been some outstanding performances on the track.
Yeah, I mean, York was a brilliant meeting, Shane. It makes such a difference to have decent midweek racing, to be honest with you. You can enjoy it. It's not running into each other like it does on a Saturday when we have sort of 4 or 5 meetings all overlapping and running into one another, and you can't get your breath. You've got time to think. There's plenty of bookmakers fighting for turnover. They bet fairly, and obviously the racing was top class. And we saw some brilliant and memorable clashes that we're going to come on to talk about later on.
That's certainly the case as Ed Quigley joins us as well. Ed, good to catch up. I'm going to give you a shout out. You've been in very good form with your tipping over the past period of time. But as we do reflect on York, one of the key lessons, I suppose, is to work out which horses will continue to progress on. Some horses get to York, and by that stage, they're almost at the end of their tether from a season perspective. But at the same time, you can see some horses really come and emerging through the ranks.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right, Shane. I mean, we 2-year-old crop have been a little bit uninspiring this year. There might have been a couple of eye catchers from that meeting, but as Stephen kind of touched upon, the established stars are the ones that really kind of caught the eye, didn't they? Obviously, like Snowfall, Mishriff, the old boy Stradivarius still battling on well. And it is a good question, as you say, Shane, how much more in the locker is there to come from those horses as they get into the autumn? And essentially when the ground starts to change as well. So, lots to ponder upon, lots to look forward to. And as you say, York was an absolutely cracking meeting. It's one of, right up there is one of my favourite flat meetings of the entire calendar year. And it just didn't disappoint again. It's high-class affairs. And, I think there's a lot of information to glean from that meeting going further forward.
Yeah, we'll certainly talk more about that a little bit later on the show. But guys, I really want to get both of your views on how best to do form when it comes to horse racing. I come from Australia, as I talk about on a regular basis, but back in Australia, there's often a lot of discussion around sectional times and how that can influence the way that you do form in racing. Certainly weights and measures, so the handicap ratings and so on. Stephen, I'll start with you. What are the key ingredients you look for when you're trying to work out the best way to back a horse in a race? Is it price sensitivity? Is it framing your own market? Is it recent form? Is it long form? Is it handicap rating? What stands out the most for you?
Well, I mean, it's a good question, not an easy one to answer. We could talk for hours, Shane, but with regard to your point about times, I've always thought you should only really worry about time when you're serving it, which obviously is in Australia, that'll be something close to your heart. But on a serious matter, I think that price is the actual key to everything with betting. You need to have an idea in your head or even write down or use computer algorithms to price things up as near as you can to 100% in a race that have an understanding of the form of all the runners, and then look for price discrepancies. That is the key. We can all tip up short price favourites. I do a lot of the time myself, but the actual way to make punting and betting successful is to find horses at bigger prices than their true chance, and actually pricing it up. If you get into the habit of pricing races you're confident about, I'm not talking about pricing 2-year-old maidens up or a seller Foss Lass or something like that. Price up things that you're confident of, say a grade 1 race or a big handicap on a Saturday. You'll be amazed what it actually does. It stops you backing things at short prices because it's very, very hard to bet to 100% and make things genuinely very short. And what tends to happen now more and more in an exchange-driven age is that the front of the market is extremely compressed and the value is thinnest at that point. I mean, if you look on Betfair at the stats, if something has a Betfair SP of 6-4, which is basically a 40% chance of winning, that horse will probably win around 38%, 39% of the time. That's how accurate the Betfair SP has got. So you are better off, if you can, identifying horses at bigger prices that get overlooked. If you can find a weak link, personally, I look for weak links at the front of the market. So I'm sure Ed will come onto this say in a jumps race, in a chase, there's 5 runners. If I've seen the favourite win last time out and it jumped left and it's now going right-handed, I'll be thinking, well, I think this is underpriced at 6-4 this morning. I think there's going to be value elsewhere. So I'll have a real good look at that race, because I think that the 40% of the market might well be overstating that one's chance. And you can find value. It's about finding value prices rather than necessarily the winners will look after themselves, Shane, in the end, as long as your pricing is right.
As a former bookmaker, Stephen, we've mentioned this on previous editions of this show. So when you're doing your pricing, what are the key ingredients that will influence the way that you set your price? Are you looking to see what's across the board, so other bookmakers and where they're at, to give you a rough guide, or is there a set criteria that you work to try and help you find that edge that you referenced earlier when it comes to a value perspective?
Yeah, I mean that is a very good question. We've all got unique ways of doing things, Shane. I would things like the going, obviously, is it crucial, and staying up to date with the going, because and that's something punters can use Twitter for, because that is an excellent medium of finding out whether it's pouring with rain or there's a bias on one side of the track. Or there's a lot of information out there. I do pay a lot of personally to things like stable form, which I think is important and still underrated slightly. I mean, everybody knows, John Gosden's had 10 winners in the last 14 days, but they might not know that David Loughnane's had 5, from 14 run or something like that. So I do think that does make a difference. Obviously, the trip, the draw. One of the things that gets overlooked, particularly on the flat, or not overlooked, but it is something to bear in mind, is if you watch the first race of the day, say it's on the straight 5 furlong course at Goodwood, you can immediately see that there's a big bias, and that very often is the case. And the bookmakers are slow to react to races later on the card, for instance, where high draws might be a big advantage. I mean, I remember going back to my spread betting days when I was a trader at Sporting Index, which is a long, long time ago, believe it or not. But we used to have punters. They'd go over the line in the 2 o'clock at Goodwood, and while you were sort of watching and trying to work out, settle the bets and all the rest of it, you'd suddenly see a flurry of warm punters on the 5:45, all buying those horses that are drawn high. That's how quick you've got to be. You've got to adapt, and things change rapidly in racing. You've got to be on the ball.
Is the majority of your work done pre the meeting commencing? So, for example, I mean, you do a phenomenal job finding winners on Betting Expert, and your tips are quite often loaded into the system 24 hours or more in advance of the race meeting. But from a personal perspective, do you have a set criteria and then you evolve it as the day unfolds? Or how manipulated will you be by the changes to going and so on, and how your betting process will be on the day?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to adapt. I mean, I get up very early every morning and try and do the form. But I think now, one thing I will say, Shane, and you think you touched on this before, you do need to specialise a bit. It's no good trying to bet on 47 races on a Saturday afternoon. You've got to put a line through, probably half of them, a minimum, and then focus in on maybe the 10 you're confident that you've got a strong. We've all got opinions. I've got a lot of opinions. Some of them are not very good. But you've got to find areas where you're good in, or where you think you're favourite. Or I always bang on about when the place terms are in your favour. I mean, when I was in my 20s, sort of fresh out of university, I was a bookie at a dog trap. But I was very obviously young and hungry and trying to get going. But there was fantastic value in the each-way markets that now you've got absolutely no chance of getting on anywhere. I used to back courses each way. It was 6-4 on, 4-1, and a search party. You could literally have 700 quid each way at 4-1. Well, you're getting 5-4 on a place, 3 places. On Betfair now, they'd be 10 on. I mean, you're getting 5-4 on. It was a 10 on. It had to fall to be out the 3, and you could get these bets on no problem. Now things have got a lot harder. I do think things are harder because we're in an exchange-driven age, Shane. And what the exchange has done is given everybody the exam answers by the off of any race. So any bookmaker, any idiot, we can see what the true chance is. Whereas before, nobody knew. I mean, they used to price up at the races. This is again I'm sure it was true in Australia pre-Betfair as well. If the Sporting Life or the Herald went 6-4, the bookies all went up 6-4. They didn't know. There wasn't any morning market. They didn't bet on three quarters of the races. So everything is constantly evolving, and you do, as a punter, you have got to keep adapting and keep trying to find angles.
It's some very good advice there, Stephen. Ed, let's focus on your perspective when you're doing the form, and you're well known for trying to find one at a big price, and you've had some great success with that over your journey. What are the key ingredients that you like to mix in when you're doing form on a race?
Yeah, interesting, Shane. I mean, there'll be two different angles here. Generally, on a kind of day-to-day basis, the two key factors I would look at would A, be the ground, and B would be course form. They're two things I think you could do a lot worse than kind of go to those two factors as big ticks in the boxes. At the top level, a lot of the Group 1 horses, they'll go on any ground, they'll act on any course. That's why they're Group 1 horses. But as you drop down, horses become a bit like me in some restaurant chain, just really fussy. And at the end of the day, they need everything right. You know, the aircon needs to be right. If I'm not happy with the chair, I want a nice spot by the window. And I think you get that with a lot of horses. And so it's amazing year after year. You come to some of these big meetings, these big handicaps, and you see a horse turn up with 0090 next to their name. But if they got the magical course of distance 3 and they've won 3 times on the same ground, that's often all you need as you drop down the ranks. And I think you can get a lot of horses that will go off at inflated prices because at the end of the day, a lot of bookmakers will price things up and they can only really afford to price things up on what they've done recently. You can't have a horse arriving on a 5-timer going off 16-1 in a handicap, even if the ground's all wrong for it, the trips are wrong for it, the trainer says it can't win. You just can't do it. So I do think I think ground is a key, and I do think the idiosyncrasies a lot of tracks is something I really like to focus on. You get these quirky tracks like Epsom, definitely one of them. The jumps code, obviously Cheltenham is very unique. You know, there was a horse called Tullamore Dew, I think, who never won at the festival, and he hardly ever did anything ever anywhere. Yet he placed it 4 of the 5 Cheltenham festivals, including as an 11-year-old. Yeah, that type of thing. So you get idiosyncrasies, and you do get horses with courses. From the price and betting perspective, I wouldn't be as data rich and as hands on as Stephen, I have to say. But the one thing I do is I tend to focus, especially the National Hunt calendar, I tend to focus on anti-post racing, and I do on the flat calendar to some extent. But I will make my anti-post tissues of a lot of these big races. So, for example, the Ladbrokes Trophy or the Paddy Power Gold Cup or the King George, I'll price them up to 100%. For an anti-post market, it's obviously a bit different. I will look for something that I think is I've got a 25% discrepancy difference on. So if there's something I make a 14-1 shot and it's gone up 22 to the bookmakers, straight away that's alarm bells to me. I'd want that in an anti-post market because in an anti-post market you're not guaranteed the run unless you're getting a concession. So I'd want a buffer, a betting to 100%, and I've got a nice kind of 20-25% discrepancy on what I make the horse. And then the other thing is something that often gets overlooked and is hard to quantify, Shane, especially when it comes to anti-post markets, is trainer quotes for targets. I often think that's such a big thing. You want to look at the history of trainers. You get a lot of the horses who will end up in these big handicaps by default for the fact they've been in good recent form, by the fact the owners and trainers said, oh, look, we've won 2 on the bounce. This is a big prize. Let's go for it. And as a consequence, they'll be towards the top of the market. They'll be soaking up a lot of the market. Yet you have the horse, which has had 1 spin over hurdles, did nothing yet. But if you hear the trainer quotes back in 4 months beforehand, today was always going to be the day. They're always, again, the ones I like to circle. So I'm not afraid if there is something at 33-40-1 anti-post. And I think, okay, yeah, it hasn't done a lot recently, but the trainer's kind of said, you know, he hasn't actually said it as such, but the kind of hints are there and is insinuated that the day will be next time out. And if you assume that the ground's going to be right and they're going back to a track they've got good form on, putting all those pieces of the puzzle together, yes, I said we could have a show for about 3 hours on this because it's multifaceted, isn't it? But essentially, for anti-post markets, I like to do tissues and look for discrepancies on a day-to-day basis, lots of factors of weights and measures. But I do think ground and course form are 2 I tend to go a lot by on a day-to-day basis.
I think in the not too distant future, we might actually do a full show on form analysis and almost a masterclass in many ways of things that we need to assess. But Ed, one point I do want to talk to you about, you've talked about trainers, you've talked around horses for courses. How much focus do you put on the jockey, the person who's on the back of the horse, steering them around the course? If they're in great recent form, or they're a claiming apprentice jockey, or they're experienced even though they might be out of form, are they things that will come into play when you're factoring the horse that you want to back?
Yes, yes, they will. Whether it's, I haven't actually got the data to back this up, I have to say, Shane, like most of the times I appear on these shows. But what I do get a bit more alarmed by is when the perceived top jock gets off. Now, I haven't got the data to say how often they get it right or wrong, and I know there are a few examples of notable examples throughout the years where major jockeys have got it wrong, like AP McCoy didn't he? Chose to ride at Fisher's Cross when More of That won the Stairs Hurdle, and he was absolutely distraught after, etc. And you could argue Ruby Walsh with Denman and Corto to some extent, that type of. But so, yeah, I do look at what jockeys are being booked onto horses, definitely. And there's some really impressive up-and-coming young riders, it has to be said. But it's interesting where the established jockey has the choice of the three, and the horse you would perceive to be the one they would go for, they suddenly don't ride. And they're riding the one that I've priced up as the outsider of those three that they could ride. Then they're interesting angles in straight away. I think, right, well, there's obviously these are the unquantifiable things, Shane, which you don't really know unless you're very close to the yard or you see them work. Because obviously that jockey's then ridden them all for a final piece of work. And that horse, who perhaps was the unfancied of the three, has shown something that week, which has meant they've got to get off. Or is it a political decision between owners? A lot of the times, unfortunately, you don't really know this until after they've had the race and the interviewer asks John Gosden or asks Paul Nicholls and say, oh, no, Sumter was riding it because of X, or we'd agreed in advance because of X. So you can tie yourselves in knots, I would say, at times over jockey bookings. And sometimes there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes we're not privy to. There's a general rule. Alarm bells go off to me when your established jockey suddenly jumps onto what I'd call the third string. That's definitely an angle I like to look at there.
Okay, we'll talk more about this in the coming weeks. Really appreciate the insight from both of you there around how you do form on racing. Guys, let's switch our attention briefly. There's been a fair bit of discussion over the past few days, particularly in the UK, but certainly in Ireland as well, and that is to do with the promotion of racing. It's to do with sponsors for horse racing. I know that in Ireland, Vincent Finnegan certainly had a piece up on irishracing.com talking about how there are challenges with sponsors attaching themselves to races in the game at the moment. There's a bit of a reshuffle going on there. In the UK, we've seen Rod Street, who is the CEO of Great British Racing, which is basically the marketing arm of the sport, talk about the challenges and the lack of funding and so on that goes into actually getting racing in the front pages of the newspapers or in the lead items on news services on television and so on. Seems to be a real shift at this day and age, I suppose, Stephen. I'll start with you as to what is the right method. Those of us in the racing bubble who love the sport and follow it on a daily basis, we are interested in the stories of the markets and the odds and the race shape and so on. But there seems to be a perception that we're still going to go and throw the net wide and try and get those who may just have a fleeting moment into the sport and see what we can do with them. Do you think it's a misguided approach? What's your view on the promotion of racing?
Well, this is another sort of deep breath job, Shane. I mean, I saw Rod Street's 20-page Twitter explainer, which, to summarise for people who haven't seen it, was basically, we only get £1 million odd. We're doing really well considering we only get £1 million odd. Everything's fine. That was my reading of it. And I then saw Fergal O'Brien, who's a very good Twitter person to follow, an exceptionally good account. And he said, wouldn't it be nice if we heard something about racing promotion from people who actually have to pay to get in or have to pay to enter the horses? And I thought that was a very fair point, because a lot of these things are written by people and journalists who, when they go racing, they walk in for free, they have a free lunch, they don't mix with the public at all, they sit in the press box and the drinks cabinet's open, and they're usually gone after the day's feature race about 2:45. I mean, that might be being unfair to Rod Street. I don't know Rod Street. My impression is that racing has not been particularly well promoted, but there's an awful lot of people earning an awful lot of money for not doing an awful lot, is my honest opinion. What can you do? The first thing racing needs to be, I think you probably need to break it down in between midweek racing and Saturday racing. I mean, I've been Saturday racing probably 3 times in the last 10 years. It's absolutely horrendous. I don't particularly enjoy it. It's packed, which is wonderful for racing, but it's not a racing crowd. They could be at a rock concert, often they are afterwards. There's a lot of drinking. The last time I went on Saturday was actually my friend got married and we went to Ascot. There were 10 of us, so we were one of the guilty parties. What went on there perhaps shouldn't be discussed on a programme that's talking about horse racing. But Monday to Friday racing, you have got to look after racegoers, whether they're new racegoers, students. I think we need to advertise a lot better that kids go free under 18. I don't think people know that. I mean, I'm sure more people would take their kids racing during half term and the school holidays if they knew it was free. You need to have a free race card that explains what's going on. You need to have probably someone like a front of house person at the track to show new people round. The audio on the race day needs to be a lot better. At some tracks, it doesn't even exist at all. If you go in the Silver Ring at places like Ascot, it's so distant, you can't hear anything. You don't know result. I went to Royal Ascot 5 years ago, and we were sort of having a picnic half a mile away in the cheap seats, and you wouldn't have known there was racing on. I mean, there's no audio at all. Goodwood this next weekend is 50 quid a day to get in. 50 quid. I mean, there are probably 6 Brighton handicaps on the car. It's not even good racing. I expect there's music afterwards, which is why it's 50 quid a day. Racing does an awful lot wrong, and there's a lot of people at the top of it who earn their salaries for not doing a great deal. I think that a lot of things do need to change, Shane, to be honest.
Ed, what's your view on this? Do you think racing has got its promotion right, or is there a lot of work that needs to be done?
I think they do some aspects which are good. I do think racing. Right, put it this way. We're going to come on to prize money in a minute. I always think, generally speaking, promotion should be the top down, and I think in the case of prize money at the moment, it should be built from the bottom up. I will come on to that in the next part of the show. What I'm saying is, I agree with a lot of Stephen's points, and a lot of what he's saying see remedial issues which wouldn't cost a great deal of money to put right. In all honesty, just like nice things to have put at a racetrack, say just fixing your audio, for goodness sake, all those type of things. Those things can be put in place. But in terms of the actual marketing of the sport, I think there should be a lot more peacock feathers thrown at the top end of racing. At the end of the day, people are going to get into racing. You're going to get sold into racing by the top end, by your Royal Ascots, by your Cheltenhams, by your Glorious Goodwoods, by the Derby. And then if you like those, again, you're going to have the trickle-down effect where you'll then start to look at your Foss Lasses or your Folkestones or your Fakenhams, etc., etc., etc. I'd be shocked if you get into racing, other than a geographical perspective. If you live next door to Thirsk Racecourse, you're going to get into Thirsk. But I can't imagine you're going to become a racing fan by studying Sedgefield handicaps and then go on to enjoy Cheltenham, if you see what I'm saying. So I just often feel, I think racing does do quite well at the top end of advertising. You see Cheltenham on the billboards on the London tubes 5 months in advance. You could see Royal Ascot flouted. But I think Tom Marquand made some interesting points in his interview with the Racing Post a couple of days ago. He says, at the end of the day, we're overcomplicating all this. Racing has great horses, and it has, especially in this day and age, has some very media cooperative individuals who are very good with the social media age. So, but I think, when was the last time I saw Tom Marquand on the Jonathan Ross show, or someone like Marco Gianni? He's got incredible charisma. He's a marketing dream. He's funny, he's cheeky, he's perfect in front of the camera. Oisin Murphy. When was the last time he was on the One Show or on the Graham Norton show? I just think, if you walk down Sloane Square and you go past the Tom Ford suit shop or past the Gucci store, not advertising your socks or your T-shirts in there. They put the suit in the window, which 19 out of 20 people passing by probably can't afford and have no intention of buying. Yet it reeks of affluence. It reeks of gravitas. Peacock, this is the best. This is the best show. And I often think racing should just puff its chest out a little bit more and really go for it. And I do think we have so many individuals in this day and age, after moaning back in the 80s and 90s that you'd never have anyone who would be cooperative with the media. We seem to have a lot of them now, and we don't perhaps use them. Now, coming back to Rod Street's point, I wouldn't be privy to how that is all budgeted and how we allow for that. That would be someone out of my jurisdiction to do that. But it seems to me, I think a lot is done well at the top end, but it could be more. Coming on to the bottom end, I personally think, I agree with Stephen's points about like kids going free and a few kind of fixing issues at tracks. But I personally think you're wasting your time. The amount of times I think, we've really got to promote your Hexhams, your Sedgefields, your Foss Lasses. You could stick an advert for your Yarmouth Wednesday race card in the ad break during Love Island. You're not suddenly getting an influx of 2,000 millennials rocking up to listen to Derek Thompson's commentary the next day for a 0 to 60. I think there's a cultural shift, Shane, over perhaps 10, 15 years. People just don't care anymore. I think that's the fact. And I think the racing bubble won't admit it. They almost just see people must like racing. I think that's probably not the case. I think people like racing at the top end. As Stephen says, I think a lot of people go racing on a Saturday, not necessarily because they like racing, but it's a big social event, which is good for the turnover at the top end. But there needs to be, which I'll come on to prize money in a minute, it's all intertwined. There needs to be a trickle-down effect so that the top end, which will always take care of itself and succeed, can then enhance and allow the bottom end to flourish. So it's a complicated issue. I think racing generally markets itself pretty well, but I do think more could be done to really. And I believe, yeah, as Steve says, 1.6 million budget. I don't know how that's broken down, and I don't know how a lot of this is obtained, but I just feel there could be more. Like, final point, I'd say, like on Derby Day, I said to just a few neighbours, and it's a very small sample size, but they were like, "Oh, what are you up to?" I was trimming the hedge. I said, "No, I've got to go in. I'm off to watch the Derby." Wouldn't have known it was on. They said, "Oh, I remember that. Yeah, back in the 80s. Oh, it used to always used to be good fun." I just don't think people care anymore. And I think, what can you do? I mean, you can't force or indoctrinate it upon somebody. So yeah, it's a tricky, evolving subject, I think, Shane. But yeah, we'll come on the prize money in a moment. I can have another moan up about that.
Well, the points I'll say before we move on, I do know Rod Street, and I think he actually does a phenomenal job. He's a very good person. He's got the best intention of racing with all of the strategies that are being employed. He did touch on some good points, I thought, that they are getting people to go to the track. So quite often you'll get people through the gates. The problem is they're not being retained. The user retention strategies are not really working, so people aren't necessarily coming again. They're not betting more on horse racing. They're not considering buying a horse. So that, to me, is a big problem. And I think part of that issue is because of the layers of bureaucracy that exist in racing. There seems to be so many stakeholders. It's very hard for an organisation like Great British Racing to do their job when you've got the Jockey Club, who is a stakeholder but is also running their own marketing campaigns, or Royal Ascot is doing their own marketing campaigns, and so on. So there's a complexity there, but I think the big issues that really need to be thought of in a more broader term, and in previous roles that I've had in my life, I've worked, in the broadcasting space, both as a presenter and also as an administrator. Racing's got a huge problem where the majority of your product is being put on in hours where the vast majority of the public can't consume it. You've got to have a real focus point, is when is the best time to put the best races on so people can actually go to the track or watch it on TV. I mean, particularly in the UK, night racing, in Australia, night racing's big, but it's very rare for the featured components to be done in a time where people could actually be available to go, whether it's on the track or consuming via television or other platforms. So I think that needs to be thought about. And there is also a changing social license with animals being used in sport. Younger demographics are coming through. They're not like from our generation and above thinking that there was no issue at all with horses being trained for racing. There is a mental shift happening in younger demographics. So unless you're actually trying to get out there and talk to Gen Z or Gen Alpha, the younger demographics from 23 years and younger, and get them to really understand what racing's about and how fun it can be and the idea of betting and so on, we're going to eventually slow right down, and it won't be a mainstream sport in 30 years. And I think a lot of the attention of promotion of racing needs to be geared in that way, because the rusted-ons, they're always going to be fans. People who may go to a meeting once a year, a Royal Ascot or a Cheltenham, they'll still keep doing it. But how do you get the younger demographics through? I think that's a big problem. We'll talk more about that too in the weeks ahead, guys. A couple of quick touch points, because I'm going to get in trouble from Hans, our producer, because of how slow we're going. Let's talk about prize money increases. There is a bit of a push now. We're seeing this, Stephen, with some announcements in the past couple of days, that there is going to be some feature race prize money increases, in particular in the UK, and also for National Hunt.
Yeah, I think this is Jockey Club race courses, Shane, just quickly, that they've said they're going to get back to pre-pandemic levels, which is very welcome and good news. And quite frankly, they've got to do it. I mean, the pandemic was used by a lot of race courses as an excuse to cut prize money. There's no doubt about that. Generally speaking, they've been unaffected. The media rights money is the same. And some of them, let's be frank, are delighted not to have crowds and bookmakers on course. It suits them fine. They haven't got to employ any staff. They don't have to man anything. All the bars are shut. It's a lot cheaper for them, and they still draw the same money. I'm not talking about Saturday racing or Ascot, things like that. I'm talking about Kempton on a Monday or Lingfield on a Tuesday. No bookies, no crowd. It was absolutely fine for them. It made no difference whatsoever. And they took the opportunity to cut prize money, and it was pretty disgraceful. I mean, let's not forget that the prize money levels were absolutely disgraceful before COVID. So for them to be cut was pretty outrageous. So it's a welcome step back in the right direction. But let's hope it leads to a bit more of a stampede forwards rather than just getting back to where we were.
All right, Ed, you've mentioned prize money increases a few times in your diatribe earlier. Off you go. Tell us what you think about prize money.
Well, as I said, I was on the promotion from the top down. I think the prize money, I've said this, it's been a bit unpopular on a couple of shows. I think prize money generally is massively overrated. And what I mean by that is at the top end. When we talk about prize money, what we're really saying is I hear about an extra 10 grand gone onto this group 2, or this handicap's been boosted to 150,000. You're already preaching to the converted. You can run the Champion Hurdle for no prize money. You can run the Sussex Stakes for £0. You'd still get the same horses turn up, the same. It's the prestige. It's the want to win. These are the top end of the racing. It's often multi-millionaire owners who have got no interest in the financial aspect of things to a large extent. It's winning the big races, winning the big prizes at a money loss recognition. Where prize money is important and makes the huge difference is for your small trainers, small owners who are, as you can hear, lots of them over the last couple of years saying it's almost becoming economically unviable to have a string of 18, 20 horses when you're competing for absolute peanuts in 0 to 100s at Catterick, whatever. So I just think the prize money at the bottom end is where the issue really is. And it just makes me laugh. I remember Rich Ritchie, the multi-millionaire owner, I haven't got to get exact words. I was desperately trying to find the quote, but he was basically pushed. Why is Jack Adam not coming over for the Betfair £1 million bonus, as it was called back then? And for words to the extent, he basically said, well, why do I need £1 million? And I think we're losing sight of it a little bit. I mean, that's 3 minutes in his offshore ISA from his interest he's earning. It really doesn't matter. At the top end, everyone says it. It's happened decade after decade. The top end always takes care of itself. It always has done, always will do. Every time there's people say, the money's drying up. New billionaire owners. You've got Mr. Darren Yates buying horses for 600 grand. You've got 3 legs. You've got Gigginstown are winding down. There'll be a new force come through. JP came through 25 years ago. The top end always takes care of itself. There needs to be a trickle-down procedure in place that the bottom end, which is like most things in life, is what suffers. And we're seeing that a lot in horse racing, be it with owners deciding to pack it up because it's not economically viable, trainers handing in their licenses. You've got race courses with water pouring through the ceilings of weighing rooms at the moment at some of these smaller tracks, and you've got others going bang. So, again, it's a problem. It's a hard one to fix, but I do think racing needs to, as I said, it should advertise and flaunt the top end of it because that will be a success story as it is. And in terms of the prize money, you've got to look at the lower ends because it's going to come a point in a decade's time where you literally have 6, 8 race courses going, and that's all you know. Which is going to be very sad for the history, the heritage, and the whole racing industry as a whole. So again, we need a separate 8-hour show, which I'm sure lots of people will tune in for, Shane. But there's lots of factors here. But I do think it drives me mad when I hear, and again, the trainer Alan King, I think, registered about it. He said about the county hurdle, and that I think it had 171 entries for the county hurdle, and yet they only had 50 for the Betfair hurdle, which was worth 3 times the money. And Alan King said, but my owners just want to win at Cheltenham. That's all it is. It's simply, and that's a separate story coming on the Cheltenham on another side. But I'm trying to say is the prize money at the top end, I often think is misguided personally. So there we go.
All right. Well, the top end meeting is the York Ebor Festival, and we had a brilliant week of racing, Stephen. What are the horses that you want to follow out of it last week? We saw Stradivarius come back to winning ways in the Group 2 Lonsdale Cup. Sonny Boy Liston won the Ebor, the big handicap race. We saw some brilliant performances by some of the younger horses. What took your eye the most?
Well, I thought the race of the week was Winter Power destroying them in the Nunthorpe. That was an incredible race. I mean, at halfway in a 5-furlong sprint, they were strung out like a 3-mile chase at Fosslas. It was amazing. And I thought there'd be a pace collapse and they'd ruin each other. But often at York, that doesn't happen. It's almost one of those tracks. They seem like they're running downhill on fast ground because the pace just stands up all the time. It was a devastating display. Obviously, Mishriff was impressive. Snowfall is genuinely the real deal now. I mean, I've got to stop trying to find negatives in that one. I thought Stradivarius against Spanish Mission was the classic cat and mouse, and I thought Dettori was absolutely brilliant on Stradivarius because that was not an easy race to ride in, but Grand Vizier tore off 15 lengths in front and Dettori was sort of marooned in second, and I thought he got everything right in that race. Terrific race. 2 horses to take out in the meeting, Shane, perhaps not completely obvious, hopefully. Sandrine, who was stable nap for the Baldings, got beat. I thought there were excuses for her. She dwelt leaving the stalls and it was very hard to make up ground. I thought she ran really well to finish second. She's one to stick with. I suspect she might turn out to be nearly the best 2-year-old filly this season, certainly in the UK anyway. And the other one is Fearby of Ed Bethels, who finished 4th in the Gimcrack, obviously carrying my each way cash at 16 to 1. They always finish 4th, Shane, don't they? But Phoebe, I thought, was unlucky. He got an absolutely rank ride from Frankie McDonald. I'm sure he'd be the first to admit he sort of changed his mind at halfway. He ended up on the wrong side of the track and then switched. He finished full of running. I mean, he was a certainty beaten Phoebe, although he only finished fourth. I think he should have won the race, to be honest. And he's a horse to look forward to as his stamina's drawn out in the autumn.
All right, thanks for that. What about you, Ed?
Yeah, interesting stuff, wasn't it? I mean, obviously, the big four I touched upon earlier, you had Stradivarius, a wonderful race, absolute heart-stirring stuff, wasn't it? That really was a fantastic performance. And Snowfall, that filly, just unbelievable, clocked a really fast time for the old stopwatch specialist. And yeah, she just pulverised the field once again. She's now strong favourite for the Arc de Triomphe in just under 6 weeks' time. So that was a fantastic performance. Obviously, Mishriff hacked up. I think we touched upon this on last week's show. You could make an excuse for a couple of those in behind her. The one I wanted to focus on was a horse we touched upon was Real World for Sai Bin Saror, who's been a little bit in the shadow of Charlie Appleby over the last couple of years, it has to be said. But he seems to have a proper horse to go to war with now. And this is a horse they were a bit nervous about the ground because there was a little bit of rain on the morning. And nonetheless, he quickened up and won in really good style and was full of running at the end. Of course, Marco Gianni was doing his best Mikel Barcelona impression by giving it the big heave-ho to the crowd before they crossed the line. And I just think this is a fascinating, progressive horse as a 4-year-old. Things have really appeared to have clicked with him now. Sai Bin Saror mentioned perhaps the QE2 or the Champion Stakes after, but will be ground dependent. It sounds like there's going to be all sorts of options. They might go to the Breeders' Cup with him. They'll probably think about Meydan with him in the spring, and it sounds like he's going to stay in training as a 5-year-old as well. So I do think Real World, as I said, he won the Royal Hunt Cup off 94. He's approved £25 in the space of a couple of months. He's just one of those real late blooming 4-year-olds. Get him on a quick surface, a mile to 10 furlongs. It's definitely, I still think we're yet to see the best of him. Yes, it was only a Group 3 one at the weekend, but he's definitely still on an upward curve.
Ed, I'm 100% with you. I actually think he's the one horse you want out of this meeting that will go on and be a Group 1 star. And it could even be by the end of this season, as you touch on, whether it be the Champions meeting, or they could even consider going to the Breeders' Cup or even Hong Kong, where Godolphin's had success in over the years. Because since he's made the transition to turf racing after beginning on the synthetic or the dirt, he's just been a revelation. He is so exciting, and he might end up being one of the best horses in the world over the next 12 months. Guys, I do want to talk quickly before we have to move on and focus on the upcoming races. The 2-year-old division. We're now getting to that pointy end of the season where the real feature races for the 2-year-olds start to be laid out in front of us. I'm still convinced Point Lonsdale is the number 1 seed. It was good to see him win at the Curragh over the weekend. He was quite impressive again. Stephen, what's your view? Where's the real strength of the 2-year-old division at the moment, and how do you assess it perhaps to some of the 2-year-olds that we've seen in recent years?
Yeah, I think Point Lonsdale is the one clearly, Shane, who's the best, and also extra credit must go because Aidan O'Brien has been struggling. I mean, he's had a couple of high points, obviously Snowfall, but he's also had an awful lot of horses get beaten at short prices. I think he's only had something like 4 or 5 winners in the whole month of August now, even after a slightly better time of things at York, maybe. So Port Lonsdale's been doing it when he hasn't been. He was only really workmanlike in Ireland, landing a short price, but he's a typical horse. He's just going to keep on improving as his stamina's drawn out. I think he's going to be a cracking 3-year-old next season as well. In the UK, well, I'm not saying he's the best, but I really like the way Armour won the Molecombe. Now, he's been beaten in France since in the Prix Morny, but I think there are excuses that day. I think Armour's another one that Richard Hannon thinks will keep on improving for more racing. So both Armour and Sandrine, who I've already mentioned from York, Andrew Balding's filly, I think she's worth siding with. But I suspect that Aidan O'Brien holds all the aces.
Fair point. What about you, Ed?
Well, I suppose the two obvious ones, if you like, from ones we haven't touched upon, would be Reach for the Moon, representing Her Majesty the Queen. Now, that individual looks very exciting. Trying to get ideas. Perhaps this one could make up into a Derby contender. Interested in listening to the different viewpoints of connections, a few stamina doubts, etc., etc. Will definitely be a 10-furlong horse. Whether it'll be an Epsom horse in time, we don't quite know. But yeah, Reach for the Moon definitely one. And Inspiral for Cheveley Park, another one which made us all sit up and take note by the manner in which that one won at Sandown. The form's taken a little bit of a knock since, but nonetheless, the manner in which Inspiral went about winning was another one in the notebook. So yeah, definitely obvious candidates, if you like. But as I said, I think we touched on it at the show a couple of weeks ago. We're bit uninspired by what we'd seen from the 2-year-olds, which, like anything, as the season's now playing out, starting to get a bit more excited about them heading into the autumn months, and hopefully he should have an excellent, as we always do, a cracking 3-year-old crop for the start of next season.
It's been some good, robust discussion there early, guys, but now it's time for the upcoming races. Good racing coming our way in the UK this weekend. We'll start with Goodwood, where we've got feature racing on the card. The first is the Group 3 Prestige Stakes, sponsored by Tote for the fillies. Let's have a look at the field. Amanda Hugging Kisses at a big price, 28-1. Clitheroe's currently at 5-1. Dana at 10-3. Hello You's at 7-2. Honey Sweet at 25-1. Mise en Scene at 8-1. Prosperous Voyage at 14-1. Star from Afar is at a big price of 25. Tinderbox for Godolphin at 15-2. Mark Johnson's Value Theory, Joe Fanning in the saddle at 7-1, and Wilderness Girl there at 12-1. All right, Stephen, from the Prestige, who do you want to be with?
I like Hello You here, Shane. Quite keen. I think my best bet of the weekend, actually. David Loughnane has got this one from Rafe Beckett, which I think personally is a good trainer switch. Loughnane's having a really good season. He's a very shrewd yard. This one, good form with Sandrine at Royal Ascot, and then last time on debut for the yard at York, actually, last week in the Lowther. If you watch the run back, she didn't settle for the first 2 furlongs, then had her run messed about, and I thought she finished with plenty of running left in the tank, just on the heels of the leaders. That was over 6. She steps up to 7 at Goodwood on Saturday, which I think is a big positive. The only thing I'll say is she will need to settle. I mean, I hope they're going to go a proper gallop, and she does drop the bit because she is a bit free. But if she does settle, she'll definitely stay 7. I think she's got loads more improvement in the tank, and I think she's got the best form. And 4-1 is a very fair price if she does settle.
All right. Hello, you from Stephen. Ed, what's your assessment?
Yeah, not a particularly strong view on this contest. However, we touched upon it earlier on in the show. I did say that idiosyncrasies of some tracks are something I often hone in on. Goodwood would be one of those very quirky course. You either love it or hate it there. And Wilderness Girls trading at double figures for Andrew Balding, who's having one of the best seasons, if not the best season of his career. Traded at double figures here, and yeah, it was only a fillies maiden she won last time, but she did it in nice style. And Goodwood can often unbalance a lot of horses, and she is quite big, yet she looked very nimble, I thought, and she quickened up quite nicely in the closing stages. Balding team on fire. Kieran Fallon rides. She's around 12-1. As I said, when I looked through this, I thought she'd be a few points shorter in the market, if truth being told. So, yeah, definitely one at double figures. That does make some appeal.
All right, we've got a small field of 5 for the Tote March Stakes over 1.6 mile, and the field is made up of Classic Lord, Ashee Murphy in the saddle, Dancing King, Juan de Montalban, Nagano, and White Pepper. I think there's a good thing in this race, but I'll come to that shortly. Stephen, who do you like?
I thought this was really trappy and difficult, Shane, actually. I've gone for Juan de Montalban. I liked his win at Sandown last time. He got taken on a long way out and kept pulling out more. He's up 4 furlongs in trip, which I think should suit him. You can take a chance at 6-1 that he'll stay. And I'd also like the fact he's had 2 runs at Goodwood. Goodwood's unique and undulating, as regular racing watchers all know. And if you can handle it, you'll handle it again. And he's a winner there, albeit on much softer ground. But I think he's unexposed, open to improvement. I like David O'Mara when he comes down south on a Saturday. So hopefully that one should go well.
All right, good push for 1 there from Stephen. Ed, your assessment?
Okay, I'm just interested to hear your good thing here, Shane, to be honest with you, because my tentative thing would be Classic Lord. Again, another Andrew Balding horse who's a previous Goodwood winner. Oisin Murphy in the saddle this time round. Won at Sandown last time out. Appears to really enjoyed going up to these staying trips and thought clearly is in fine fettle. So about fifth favourite out of those lining up, or 4th favourite out of those lining up. Thought again was maybe a point overpriced or so. But yeah, I'm relying on you for this one, Shane.
I'm going with Nagano or Nagano, whichever way you want to go. Terrific winner at the glorious Goodwood Festival. I think with the step up in trip even further for a horse on an upward spiral, he's the one to beat. I know he's short price favourite, but I'm very, very keen on him. Let's go to the big one of the day, and that is the Group 2 Tote Celebration Mile. Long been a fantastic late summer race. Been battle. Good to see the old boy back. 11-4. He's well in the market. Duke of Hazard at 12-1. Escobar's at 20s. Happy Power at 12s. Pogo at 14s. Stormy Antarctic, the old boy, at 12s. Lavender's Blue at 20-1. Chindit, current market leader at 130 or 10-3. Mustabeck at 7-2, well in the market for Jim Crowley and Charles Hills. And Perotto at 7-1 for Marcus Tregoning. Stephen, do you have a view for the Celebration Mile?
Yeah, I wasn't mad on the front end here, Shane. Ben Battle is a classic Betfair horse. He's been put in 5-2 favourite with the bookmakers. He could be 7 or 8 to 1. I mean, we haven't seen him for 11 months. He didn't run that well the last time we saw him. He's bound to have had a million things wrong to only be appearing on August the 28th, to be honest. As I say, 11 months off. So the market will be a very accurate guide as to what happens with him on the track. The favourite, joint favourite, Chindit's had a lot of racing and a hard race the other day. So I've gone elsewhere looking for a big priced outsider. Stormy Antarctic is old, Shane, but gold. A strong traveller. Most of his form has been on softer ground recently, but I don't think he'll mind decent ground at a track he's already won at this summer. As I say, he's a strong traveller with a turn of foot. He drops back to a mile, and watching him his last couple of runs, I don't think that'll be a bad thing at all. He travelled strongly and didn't quite get home last time. Dettori is also quite an eye-catching booking. I suspect he's the sort of horse that people won't fancy. He's up in class and he's 8 years old, but he could be 20 to 1 or bigger on the exchanges, and I think that'll be a few points over the odds.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Ed, you with the favourites, or are you going wide as well?
Well, yes, normally the David Minutier fan club. Well, it's the Andrew Balding fan club this week because Happy Power for Andrew Balding, Sylvester D'Souza's double-figure price. Again, just a horse who loves this venue, has career form figures of 4-3-1-3 at the track. Was beaten half length in this race a couple of years ago. Ran over 7 last time out. Just looked a little bit outpaced at a crucial stage. Back to a mile, back at a track he enjoys. Yard of flying, double-figure price. Doesn't have a lot to find on official figures either. So again, at 11 to 1, I thought it was a horse who's probably a couple of points too big there. So yeah, hoping for a good day for the team Balding on Saturday at Goodwood.
Fair enough. Let's go to Newmarket now. Another good card of racing led by the listed Close Brothers Hopeful Stakes, and a good field being pulled together with Summergad, the top weight 13 to 2. Mum's Tipple, the highly rated horse, yet to really deliver on what those early vibes were at 9 to 1. Chief of Chiefs at 11s, Extraordinaire at 33s, Cadem at 5s, Royal Crusades also at 5 to 1. Tab Deeds at 15 to 8, the market leader. Royal Scimitar at 12s, Gellhorn at 40 to 1, and A Day to Remember at 12 to 1. So we've got a fairly short price favourite here, Stephen.
Yeah, I've got this down to 2, Shane, between Tab Deed, the 2 to 1 favourite, just under that, I think, at the moment, who I thought ran really well last time at Newbury in the Hackwood. If you watch that run back, his run got messed about, but he had to squeeze through to take it up, and they rather ruined each other, him and Diligent Harry, and both got mugged late by Happy Romance. So I think that one is a solid favourite. At the prices, though, I think Cardem, who's around 6 to 1, probably a really good each way bet. Again, a horse who he's been expensive to follow this summer. He's not been unbacked or missed in the market on any run, but last time at Chester, plenty went wrong early. He was really wide early on, which isn't where you want to be around that dog track. And I thought he ran a bit better than the bare result. He's a course and distance winner in the past at Newmarket. He should go really well. He looks a really solid each way bet, about 6 to 1.
Yeah, blinkers on first time Cardem, so a nice push there. Ed, your view?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Cardem camp for this one. Blinkers are on 7 furlongs, trap wide on sticky ground at Chester. Put a line through that run. Has a very good form at this track. Course and distance winner. Won the Stewards Cup. And then has ended up in that limbo land between being a Group 1 sprinter and too high in the handicap, if you like. But this looks a feasible opportunity. Wasn't beaten far at all in the July Cup behind Oxted, but you watch the race back. I think back at this track, on a quicker surface, just need the headgear to, a bit like me after 5 cups of coffee, Shane, just light me up in the morning. And off goes Cardem on a track he enjoys. I think he's got outstanding claims at the prices.
All right, good push from both of you there for Cardem. Let's have a look at a rare feature meeting coming from Windsor. A very, very quirky track in its own right. The first of the features is the listed August Stakes over almost 1.5 miles. Alfred Boucher is the number 1 horse going into this race. Desert Encounters there. Extra Elusive's also there. Foxtel for Andrew Balding and David Probert. Alias also in the field. Domino Darling for William Haggis with Richard Kingscote in the saddle. Narmoose is there. And the filly Tiona makes up the field of 8. So trappy affair, I think, on face value, Stephen.
Yeah, very trappy. And this is the 6th meeting on Saturday afternoon, Shane. I'm not sure we needed all of those. They'll all be overlapping as well by about 4 o'clock when the evening meetings start. But anyway, I went for Extra Elusive here. Roger Charlton's had a really disappointing season, but there have been encouraging signs of late. And this one goes particularly well for Holly Doyle. Round Windsor, course and distance winner on this card last year, in fact. has not run well the last twice, but it's been on very testing ground. Now, he has won at testing ground in the past, so maybe that's not the excuse that I'm hoping it is. But back with Holly Doyle on board, a positive front-running ride is never a bad plan at Windsor, and he might be a pretty big price.
Yeah, good point there. And Pacifier's on for the first time too, so a little subtle gear change. Ed, what's your view?
I was wondering about rolling the dice with Tiona here. Number 8, the filly Roger Varian. Obviously, this individual looked one with a lot of potential as a 2-year-old, and then finished third when chasing home Snowfall in the Musadora. Went to the Oaks. Roger Varian said basically just hated the whole occasion, got worked up, got unbalanced, didn't like the track. Drops down, takes a big hike down in grade, if you like. There's a much more suitable level here, much more conventional track as well. She's clearly got a little bit of temperament issues, but she can keep a lid on things. I'm convinced there's much more to come, and you've also got to factor in how unexposed she is in a race of this nature. So yeah, Tiona, the forgiving type, and I think she deserves one more crack, especially down at listed level, dropping out of the Oaks.
Push for the filly. Let's go to the final of the features, and a very small field's been assembled for the Winter Hill Stakes at Group 3 level. Field of 4. Bangkok, Andrew Balding and David Probert is the number 1 horse in the race, carrying the penalty. Harrovian's in the field. Solid Stone and Fancy Man makes up the field of 4. So on face value, it certainly does look a very good option for Bangkok, despite the fact he's giving away a fair bit of weight. Stephen, what's your view on the race?
Yeah, I mean, 60 grand on offering prize money, showing 4 runs. This is what happens when you have too much horse racing. I mean, Windsor will be absolutely mortified that this is probably one of their biggest races of the whole year. It's just attracted 4. I thought Bangkok was by far the likeliest winner. He is quirky. I mean, he's won 6 of his 23 starts, which is a good return. But he's got a bit of a high head carriage. He's not the easiest, but maybe the turns at Windsor, fast ground, might wake him up a bit. He did just enough to edge home on the nod at York last time. There's risks attached at a short price, but I should think he'll either be winning or losing by a pretty narrow margin. He won't be far away.
All right, Bangkok on top there from Stephen. Ed, are you in the same camp?
Yeah, I just thought officially a best horse is penalised, obviously, for a reason. Ground to be fine, yard of flying. Yeah, again, my hashtag Andrew Balding shirt on for next week's show. And I thought Bangkok wins.
All right, good stuff. It's now time for tips of the week. All right, we'll start with Stephen as we reflect on your form for last week. And you struck out on a rare occasion for us last week, Stephen, although it wasn't too bad for us overall. We only lost 4 units for the weekend, and you're well ahead with 74.5 units ahead of schedule with your tips throughout the season. But glorious journey and on to victory, missing out. Let's have a look at who you like this week. Who are you most keen on?
Yeah, it's a really good quality. And my best bet of the weekend is the 150 at Goodwood. Hello, you. David Loughnane, a trainer I like, only had this filly for 1 run. I thought ran a screamer at York, ready for a step up to 7. As long as she settles, she must go close. Staying at Goodwood, the 225, Dance Fever, I thought was a bit unlucky at Haydock last time when everybody was on. Sent off 6-4, just conceded first run. There's loads more to come from him. I think it'll take a lot of beating. And finally, a big priced one at Goodwood in the 335, Stormy Antarctic, who's old enough to smoke, Shane, but dropped back to mile on better ground. I think could be a really big price with Dettori up. Should go well.
All right, 3 good selections there from Stephen. Ed, as touched on earlier, you bounced back in fantastic form with us last week, and you've really righted the ship. Now you're 22.5 units up. You had a good result last week, winning 8 units with Winter Power, Real World saluting, missing out on Blue Cup and Potapova. But certainly, as I said earlier, you're in very good form. All right, let's go through your selections for this week.
Yeah, absolutely. We just touched upon them, Shane, but the main fancy would be Cardem. At Newmarket, I say the horse enjoys the venue, ground will be absolutely fine. Blinkers are on for the first time. Doesn't have masses to find, I don't think, in this assignment. And I just think if that change of headgear just ekes out a little bit more improvement, horse returning to a venue which he really enjoys, he's got to go wow. Forget Chester last time out. They experimented over 7, got trapped wide, hated the ground, put a line through that. Much more his bag there. And then, Bangkok at Windsor, disappointed when I looked at that race in advance. The fact it has cut up to just 4 runners now, you're not going to get a fancy price, but I just thought it was the best horse in the contest, the yard of flying, and is the most likely winner in layman's terms. So, Bangkok for me.
All right, Cardam and Bangkok there from Ed. Let's have a look at my form from last week, and it wasn't good. I missed out with Berkshire Shadow. Very, very disappointing in the Gimcrack Stakes. Really went off the boil there. And State of Bliss also missing out in the Sky Bet handicap after setting the pace and weakening over the concluding stages. So after what had been a nice little run, I lost 10 units last week. I'm now down 13 units, but I'm going all in on a horse this weekend. I'm very keen on Nagano to win the Tote March Stakes at Goodwood. 10 units on, currently getting 7-4. I like this horse. I think the way it won at Glorious Goodwood suggests that there's more to come, and I think the step up in trip will suit. So that's my selection. All right, Stephen, a quick wrap of what's coming up this weekend. What are you looking most forward to from a racing perspective?
Yeah, well, for me, it's about Hello You, Shane. I really like this filly, and I think she's going to keep on improving when she gets her stamina drawn up. She's out to 7 furlongs for the first time, having run 4 times at 6. So hopefully she settles. They should go a good gallop, and I'm really hopeful she can win at 4-1 for betting expert followers.
Good stuff. Good luck to you, Stephen. Ed, what are you looking forward to the most this weekend?
Right, well, I've got half marathon training commencing. I've got my sister-in-law's wedding. I've pretty much been teetotal for 3 months, so I don't know how I'm going to avoid the West Country cider that they've shipped up there in barrels. So I've got all sorts of problems. And also, it's in the absolute end of nowhere. So trying to get phone signal to watch all these Andrew Baldy good things win by half the track is going to be an absolute nightmare. So I've got all sorts of problems of a different kind this weekend, Shane. But no, seriously, it's good action, keeping the bets to minimum, but we'll really enjoy it. There is quite a lot of action on. And we go again next week.
Good stuff, and good luck to you. There we have it. Stephen Harris and Ed Quigley joining me here on Jump to It. There is a lot to look forward to this weekend. Make sure you get involved and keep up to speed with what's happening racing-wise on irishracing.com. Vincent and the team do a fantastic job. And, of course, betting experts Stephen Harris, who does fantastic tipping on our show. But, of course, you can get his tips each and every day, his best bet or his nap bet and his value bet on Betting Expert. And make sure we had a lot of discussion at the top of the show today on a variety of issues. We'd love to know what you think on those. Make sure you subscribe to our channel here and put in some comments. And of course, you can also reach us on social media at Betting Expert. Hope you've enjoyed today's show of Jump to It. We'll see you again next week.